Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's podcast of Green Driving and Thriving. Today is October 8th, 2024, and this is podcast number 6.
All righty.
Very exciting.
All right, so today's topic, we're going to be talking about an extreme condition that we all just went through in the Bay Area.
Man, oh man.
Yeah, which is the driving in extreme heat.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because we typically get a late sort of summer heat wave. And this is what we're dealing with right now in early October. Man, it's been high 90s, almost 100 degrees here in Castro Valley, which is not too usual.
Yeah, no, and actually the Bay Area has broken a lot of heat records, global warming.
Global warming is for real.
You know, like it's the hottest it's ever been since like 1919 in like San Jose and places like that. And, as the week rolls around, Monday, that's a lot of people driving, 1 million people on the road.
Yeah.
So, that's scary conditions.
Yeah. No. So heat, Mike, is not something that is considered necessarily a dangerous situation for driving. I think sort of in general, of course, we're more concerned with, rain, heavy fog, ice, stuff like that. But I think there are some concerns around driving in extreme heat, and I'm hoping you could share some of those with us.
Oh, absolutely. So the biggest one is the agitation of other drivers.
Oh, man.
Everyone has that bad day, but when it's a hot, bad day, it just sets people...
magnifies it.
Worse. Yeah, it just makes it worse.
Yeah. I mean, your energy's down, your whole everything just gets, just like you said, just makes everything worse. Getting out of bed in the morning and you're already beginning to feel heat, or maybe you didn't sleep quite, too well the night before because it was so hot, which that happened to me a couple nights, man. Fan on, even like had to turn the AC on in the middle of the night. That lack of sleep, you're going to be agitated.
Yeah, and that contributes to road rage.
It does.
Yeah, and so everyone's on their last nerve.
Yep.
And if someone cuts you off or something happened like that, you don't want to be on the other end of someone who's snapped.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's one of the major concerns of driving in heat. Another major concern would be the wear and tear on the vehicle.
Yeah, no, that's a big one. I think that is a little bit almost like not appreciated, I guess, in terms of like how dangerous it is. But we've experienced several problems once our Priuses, which we love, and our total workhorses. But when they get hot, real hot, we have some breakdown issues. We have problems.
Yeah. So one of the big things that you have to look out for is active cooling in your vehicle. So there's things that need air.
Yes.
and cool air,
right,
to cool on your vehicle. Otherwise, they'll experience excessive wear.
Yes.
So the one thing that we noticed in our Priuses is that our bearings,
yep,
which they don't have a radiator system or anything like that.
Right.
They require just the air flow, right, that comes up underneath the vehicle, yep, and like through the thing, through the tires, to cool those little like greased bearings,
right,
in the wheel pack.
Yeah.
So if that isn't happening, or
right, if your cool air is over 100 degrees,
yeah, well,
right,
yeah, especially, and you have to think about not just the air around, right, but the ground temperature itself,
the radiating heat.
Yeah, so if you can crack an egg and fry an egg on the ground, that's the air that you're trying to cool these parts of the car down with.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so, as a side note, at the driving school, we tend to we recognize that extreme heat, and in temperatures that we know for sure are going to be over 100 degrees, we will cancel lessons for the day.
Yeah, so our cutoff actually is for over 100.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like if it's over 100, there's that leeway, and then the 104 is the absolute cutoff.
Yeah.
We actually call and cancel lessons.
Yeah.
If it reaches 104 during that day, because it's not safe.
It's not safe, and again, it's underappreciated, we think, but it's not safe for a new student. It's not safe for our instructor. The vehicle can experience problems. Again, we're talking about the agitation of other drivers on the road, and the last thing we need is a driver to be extra agitated with our new driving student who's just not quite comfortable and just sort of causing issues that normally would have been just sort of dismissed as a new driver and not such a big deal, but now under an extreme agitation, now drivers are getting that road raging.
Yeah, absolutely. Those extra 2-3 seconds at a green light.
Oh, man.
Like a regular horn might help them release that anger, but
Right.
some people it's not enough.
No, it's not. What about fire dangers? How tell me a little bit about that. Are there concerns under just normal driving conditions where you may possibly start a fire?
Absolutely. So there are certain things that you should always do, and then there's in especially high heat situations,
Yeah.
you should always prepare yourself and prepare your vehicle for these situations.
Yeah.
So one of the big things is never park in tall grass. So like if you're pulling up to your friend's house and they're they have a driveway, but then there's like to the side of the driveway, like I want to leave the driveway open for them.
Sure.
Because
Right.
you don't want to take mom or dad's spot.
Yep.
So you're gonna be I'm gonna pull off to the road. Well, if there's dry grass that's reached up and touching the bottom of your car,
Yeah.
trust me, the operating temperature for a car is 150, 180 degrees.
It's very hot.
Yeah, so that can actually ignite the grass under the vehicle
Yeah.
and start a fire.
Yeah. So I think that's also something, and sometimes we feel like situations are kind of maybe not so much in our control, but what if I'm driving down the freeway and whatever happens to the car, maybe I get a flat, maybe the battery, I don't know, something just goes wrong and I need to pull over and there's tall grass there, right? Like right. Immediately I need to be aware of sort of my positioning of the vehicle, and sometimes it is a very extreme case where you don't have the luxury of driving a little bit further or pulling over in a different place, but that could immediately create a danger.
Yeah, absolutely. And then that also goes with being prepared.
Yeah.
For those situations.
Yeah.
Because no one can predict when you're going to get a nail in your tire.
No.
No one can predict when the car's going to break down. It could be a brand new car. It just could shut down.
Right. Absolutely.
And so one of the things that I would recommend, especially if you're going to be driving in any high heat situation or if you're going on a long road trip,
Yeah.
you have to bring extra water in the vehicle.
Absolutely.
Bring something to cover yourself with the shade.
Yeah.
Because if you break down and you're on the side of the road, your car is going to be hot.
Yeah.
In 10 minutes, a car can go from 100 degrees from the outside to 180 degrees inside.
Yeah, yeah. So if you're going to be sitting in the car waiting for roadside assistance or whatever the case is, it's going to get hot. And if your car's not running or are unable to run, there's no air conditioning. If you have to stand outside of the vehicle, like you said, you could be exposed in that extreme heat. So there's definitely some things to think about. And what about in terms of if you're in a tricky spot on the road where you may want to kind of put out some kind of warning to other drivers? In that case, there becomes dangers that we hadn't even thought of previously, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that we do here at Go Green is we've moved away from the traditional flare.
Yep.
Like sometimes your emergency kit in your car will actually have those flares.
Absolutely.
Like you see when they're doing street sweeping or anything like that.
Yep.
But those actually are flame. They're a big match.
It's fiery.
So in high heat and like high wind situations, you don't really want to throw those on the ground.
No way.
So they make these little LED indicators, and they're just as bright as a flare.
Yeah.
And they're rechargeable. They work really, really good, and they're safer.
Yes.
So we would recommend using those instead of the actual flares.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Are there any other things that I need to be concerned with in terms of the effect the heat may have on the car? For instance, the tires. Is there any effect on the tires or the brakes?
Yeah. So again, with the active cooling.
Yeah.
The tires don't have their own radiator system.
Right.
So they are running over that hot ground.
Yeah.
It increases wear on the tires.
Of course.
And same thing with the brakes. Everyone has heard of that, like when you're going downhill, you don't brake the whole time, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You kind of let off so that your brakes can cool down.
Yeah.
Now imagine your brakes are at the hottest they're going to get, and then you keep adding to that it's excess of wear.
Yeah, it's accumulating, right?
Yeah, it's
hotter and hotter.
It's gonna make everything makes heat. All friction makes heat, and driving is friction.
Yeah, yeah.
And so with add in an ambient temperature 30 degrees more than in normal. That's 30 more degrees, and that's adding to excess damage on the vehicle.
Yeah, so we recommend, as well as it's our policy at the driving school, that if you can avoid driving in temperatures over 100 degrees, avoid driving. I mean, if you residents in Arizona or Las Vegas where it's extremely hot, their whole culture changes, right? I mean, during those extremely hot, they don't even leave the house, right? We're not used to that here in California. We're kind of spoiled by our perfect weather and all that. But I think as things do tend to kind of, deal with more and more heat, we need to be aware of that and think in terms of planning our shopping trips or our, things that aren't urgent or in the time where it's cool, right? And just try to avoid being on the road.
Absolutely. Like PG&E does the surge hours. Yep. And then, after 7 p.m., it's a lot cooler. Yeah. Before 10 a.m., it's a lot cooler.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you have to do something regarding with driving around, like that would be the time to do it.
Yeah.
And then, if you're lucky enough to work for somewhere where you can work from home, that would be, I would assume, in the future with the increasing temperatures that we move to like a rainy day or a snow day system for heat days as well.
I do believe that we are going to have to more regularly address that situation as the temperatures do get a little bit hotter. We just need to adapt.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's see. What as a driver can you do? You have to get out there. You have to drive. Sun's out, blaring, just such a hot day. What kind of things should I be thinking about just in terms of myself?
Okay, so things to keep in mind is have the correct mindset when you're driving.
Okay.
You may be rushed, you may be sweaty, uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's hot.
You're going to be, yeah.
But we don't want to contribute to that road rage that we talked about earlier.
Right.
And that's something that we have to do internally.
Yeah.
And,
mindset,
reassess.
Absolutely.
But I would recommend, if your car has the option, running the air conditioning.
Right.
Keeping it nice and cool for yourself.
Yeah.
And then planning your trip accordingly.
Yep.
If you have to get gas, make sure you get gas when it's nice and cool.
Right.
If you, and then also wherever you're parking, keep in mind of the stuff that's going to be in your vehicle.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, everyone's had
electronics or whatever. Yeah.
Everyone's had a can of Coke or something explode in their car.
Yeah.
And some people who live in cold climate, the same thing happens.
Yeah.
But in the heat, if the sun's beating down on like a laptop or something like that, it can actually overheat that battery.
Yeah.
And lithium
doesn't take a lot.
Yeah, lithium ion batteries can catch fire.
They can catch fire.
Yeah. So as a driver, you have to be on a lookout, and also we do experience this phenomenon when the heat is radiating on the ground.
Yeah.
And you get those like mirage.
Yeah, I think sun glares.
Yes,
call it, right?
sun glare. Yeah.
I've always called it the mirage effect. Right?
Yeah. You're like,
it almost looks wet.
Yeah, it's like, is that a lake in front of me?
Right. Yeah, so you could definitely see how those old cartoons I think used to show out in the desert, right? Like makes me think of Bugs Bunny or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. That's like the mirage.
The mirage. Yeah. Absolutely. It's funny, man, because I dug into the driver's handbook here, and I'm not sure that I agree with everything that is said. So let's talk a little bit. And again, the information provided for extreme heat is pretty limited, right? I think that again, as we adapt, I think the DMV is going to need to adapt and kind of expand what they say here. But they only say the three things to do are watch the temperature gauge, which avoid driving at high speeds for long periods, and turn off the air conditioner. Watch the temperature gauge. Obviously, I think that's common sense, right? Avoid driving at high speeds for long periods. What do you think about that?
I mean, it's a little bit. I mean, you should avoid driving over the speed limit at all times.
Always.
Yeah.
Right.
So high speeds.
Let's say high speed freeway speed.
Yes.
Let's assume that's
65,
what they're talking about.
70. Yeah. We're moving at a rate where the car is moving quicker.
Yeah. Air is flowing.
Air is flowing, and these situations, like if it's 100 degrees, I mean, I would rather be driving at a freeway speed than is stuck in dead stop traffic.
Oh man, that's when the car really gets hot.
Yeah, then the car has no way to cool. Like the passive cooling of the air,
right? Yeah,
it's gone.
Yeah.
So you're just sitting and baking, and all the components of the vehicle are just baking with you.
Hot, right? Yeah. It's funny, Mike. It reminds me of a time. This was years ago where I took a student We were at the Coliseum DMV, and it was one of those days, we've all been there, where the line just gets backed up, and maybe there was an examiner or two who had called out sick that day. And luckily the student was pretty even keeled. But as we waited in line, they instructed us, which is typical for the DMV, to shut the cars down. No air conditioning right at that point. And it was high 90s, man. And we waited in that line over an hour, and it was gross. Quite honestly, it was gross. But by the time we got there was a shade, which I was just watching, like, please let us get in the shade. And it's only 2 cars fit in the shade at one time. But by the time we got to the shade, man, I was drenched. Just sweat dripping off my arm. It was disgusting. The student was saying thing, and we're just talking about how impossible that is. And this is what their preparation time for the test is. So by the time the examiner luckily the student passed, and I think it was just one of those days. The examiner was just, imagine how agitated they were. They're having to stand outside. I think they're wearing the smog, like the lab coat thing. And it was just, one of those days, but I'll never forget. So every time that I see, turn off your air conditioner, I just think of that day. And I was like, I get it. We don't want to just, kick waste into the air and all that stuff. But on those extreme cases like that, man, like literally, one or both of us could have like passed out. The heat was very high that day. So I'm not sure I agree with turn the AC off, if there's an option.
Yeah, I think this might be a little bit outdated.
I think so.
Because, back in the day, air compressors, they took a lot of energy from the vehicle.
Yes.
Like the accessory belt that kick on to run it.
Yes.
It's like, it would make your car idle, like almost
higher.
Way higher.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nowadays with modern vehicles, it's not an issue.
Yeah.
And any wear and tear like that it would add to the engine.
Yes.
I'm willing to do that instead of
passing out from heat exhaustion or whatever.
Potentially life threatening.
Yeah.
Because if you think about it, car off.
Yeah.
Even with the windows down.
Yeah.
You're still in a 135, 145 degree.
Yeah.
Environment. That's a sauna.
Yeah. And you're losing that much water through sweat, right? Like
you can't regain it by drinking. You have to drink an electrolyte beverage.
Right.
You got to go get a Gatorade.
Right.
just to keep up with what your body's losing.
Yeah, it's true.
And that's a dangerous situation to be in, especially if someone kids might be able to handle it a lot, like teenagers.
Yeah.
But like the super young, 5 and below, and then 65 and up.
The seniors,
Yeah, that could be deadly.
Very, yeah. So I think that's very important to keep in mind. Your personal situation, and if you have seniors in the car or anything like that, kids, like you said, definitely kind of changes the specific rules, and you have to adapt to at that point you're keeping people alive, you're keeping them healthy, right? So there's some gray area that comes in at that point. I think I think we've done a good job with covering most of that stuff. I think the only other thing I would recommend, for a driver on a really hot day, kind of common sense stuff. Wear your sunglasses. I've seen some different type of sun visors, a hat. A lot of times, even your sunglasses. If the sun is right in your eyes, sometimes a hat pulled down real low so you can kind of get, just protect yourself from the sun. It can be very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the tricks that I was taught growing up, we live in the Bay Area, so sunset, sometimes you end up driving right directly at the sun,
right? And
there's no option. The horizon is the sun.
It is the sun.
So my dad always taught me, find one side of your lane, and stare at that,
kind of low.
Low off to the left, so that you can. And then another trick that I learned as a truck driver, kind of put your hand up over the thing, and especially if you can drive with one hand,
right?
You kind of keep it right there, so you grab it, but you kind of put it up there, so you kind of block it a little bit, and then you're like, okay, I can see, and that's with sunglasses,
right?
Because sunglasses don't block out the sun. You shouldn't look at the sun with sunglasses on.
Yeah, no, it's very true, very true. We just had just the other day we were driving. I think it was to the softball game. And it was the exact situation. We're driving due west, and the sun's kind of low in the sky. Same thing. I'm looking down, and then I'm slowing way down because my visibility is so limited.
It's on the 238.
Yeah.
Oh, I know.
It's crazy.
It lines up right there. Yeah. In October, you just drive right directly at the sun.
Yeah. No, it gets crazy.
Yeah.
it's I wanted to share a question that we had from one of our students, and I think this is one of those things that's pretty tricky. So again, we're happy to provide a swag bag for anybody who can answer the question properly. But the question is, if you're driving down a residential street, okay, maybe with no lane markings, because it's kind of more of a narrow street, and as you're driving, one of the neighbors is standing not necessarily in the middle of the road, but right next to a car, having a conversation with the driver of that car, right? If you're coming from behind, what's the best way to approach that situation?
Yeah, and so we're gonna toss this one up to you guys.
Yeah,
and then we'll answer this on our next podcast.
Yeah,
but it's a very like controversial. Like there's a couple schools of thought on this.
There are definitely a couple schools of thought, and it depends on, I think, in the scenario, who you are.
Yeah.
Right? If you're this car, it's one thing, but what if another car's coming from the other way? Yeah. Or if you're the neighbor standing there, talking, I think your perspective is going to change from each different position. But we're asking from the driver approaching from the side where the neighbor's standing there talking. What should you do as the driver in that situation? So please comment. Remember to follow us and subscribe. And thanks for tuning in.
Yeah, and always remember to go safe
and go green.